How did the Spurs get away with this, as Luke Kornet is the Spurs' secret weapon 2 games into the season? And for anyone not paying attention to the San Antonio Spurs, they're going to have to start looking at Kornet's impact, as especially with the minutes with Victor Wembanyama off the court, he has revolutionized how we look at this San Antonio Spurs roster, even with some of the stars like De'Aaron Fox not ready to go. We got to dive into that, plus much more coming up in this episode, but we're going to start the big thing. Look, we're back home, right? We're going to get into Kornet in a minute, but right now, this is a key stretch of the season. I know it's crazy to say that this early, but we all know the wins in October and November, these are the wins, especially against lesser teams, that you got to get to really solidify your playoff spot later on in the year. If it takes you time to get going in the year, those are just wins that you're missing out on as other teams go to pass you. And coming back home for the Spurs home opener on Sunday versus Brooklyn is going to prove to be one of the biggest stretches of this season. And right now, there is no reason that the Spurs, well, there's a few reasons, but still, there's no reason the Spurs can't go 6-0 with the way they've played. Even squeaking out that very difficult win versus the Pelicans after a pretty off night. The Spurs now have Brooklyn on Sunday, home opener, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, then Toronto, then Miami, then Phoenix. Now, Miami did just put up about a 150 in regulation. Phoenix is Phoenix. Toronto, they upset the Hawks in their opener, so these are not gimmies by any means. But if San Antonio wants to solidify themselves as a playoff team, these are the games that you really, really want to win. And that's the exciting part, because right now, the San Antonio Spurs, stop the count, top of the Western Conference, number 1. Yes, Oklahoma City is also 2-0, but there's only 2 teams in the entire Western Conference that are undefeated. It's San Antonio, and it's the defending champ OKC Thunder. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. We beat the Mavericks, we beat the Pelicans, but there's still like a great chance for the Spurs to, again, pad that lead. These standings are going to change by the end of the season. There's going to be trades, I'm sure, but as the Spurs are heading into this stretch of the season, getting these wins now are so important, and if they could even go 5-1 or 6-0 in this opening stretch of the season, that completely changes how we view, again, maybe the deadline. Like, you look, again, the difference between going 5-1 and say, for example, 3-3, yes, it's just 2 wins, but with how close the West often is, that could very well be the difference between a play-in team and a solid playoff team. So this is incredibly important, and to get these wins, you need to have that depth play. And so far, Luke Kornet has been the Spurs' secret weapon. This guy has been incredible. Look, if you're a Spurs fan, you know it's not a secret, but if you're a fan of any other team in the NBA, you were looking at that Luke Kornet contract this offseason, you're like, okay, $40 million for Luke Kornet, like, pretty good deal, but really was just a backup in Boston. I mean, let's look at his stats from last year. I mean, there's nothing that pops off the board here. 6 points, 5.5 boards. Yeah, the advanced stats are fine, but why are Spurs fans so excited about Luke Kornet? Well, there's a few reasons why, and the French vanilla combo was a very interesting one against the Pelicans. They only had a few minutes against the Mavericks. They went out a lot against the Pelicans, and it's Kornet who really made the big difference. Well, Wemby, obviously, but, you know, like, he's going to make a big difference every game. In terms of, like, the bench play, right? There were some good plays from Keldon, who did foul out. Dylan Harper had a great stretch on that 14-0 run. But Kornet with 14, 12, and 4 assists, he led the Spurs in scoring after the first quarter. He had 8 and 5 after the first quarter. I believe 3 or 4 of those rebounds in the first quarter were offensive rebounds as well. The amount of plays that stayed alive strictly because of Luke Kornet's offensive rebounding was crazy. And even if it wasn't a rebound, it was a tip that went to someone else. Although I think they do count those as rebounds, but still, ridiculous play from him to keep these plays alive. These second chance points, without the second chance points, the Spurs easily lose that game versus the Pelicans. And you can just look at those stats again. A plus 11, a guy like Devin Vassell was plus 22, but Wemby was a minus 12. Kornet was a plus 11. Again, that's not to say that Kornet was more impactful than Wemby. No, but that's the point, is that when Wemby was off the court, the team was still rolling, and that bench depth, especially at the center position, has made a huge difference so far this preseason and this regular season for San Antonio. And we touched on this in the post-game yesterday, because this is one of these things that made such a difference for us when we signed him. We're like, finally, we got that backup. Everyone, Shea Serrano, really liked Kornet a lot. Great pickup for the Spurs. And this stat here, to me, is a big indicator of this point that I'm talking about. Again, this is not to say that Kornet is more impactful than Wemby. However, the Spurs' defensive rating when Wemby was on the court was 126, which is not good. You know, the higher, the worse. And when Wemby was on the floor, the Pelicans were scoring a lot, even though Wemby still had a bunch of blocks, was playing great. With Wemby off the court, 98. You can see Wemby still had a good defensive night, but some look at the 9 blocks, think it should be a great night. He did commit 5 shooting fouls, which offset some of the blocks. Like, the fouls were not really fouls. Wemby still played fine. But I'm going to take this tweet in a different direction. With him off 98, that is what we want to look at. The Spurs went on a 14-0 run without Wemby on the floor. Again, this is not putting down Victor Wembanyama. This is propping up guys like Dylan Harper, who played amazing in that 14-0 run, and Luke Kornet. Because you can afford to have Luke Kornet on the floor. He is actually doing a very reasonable job of filling in those minutes when Wemby is not there. And he can play with Wemby as well, to the tune of 8 points, 8 rebounds, 3.5 assists through 2 games this season. 58.3% from the field, 21.3 PER. PER is not the be-all, end-all of stats, but that's a pretty darn good PER. His defensive impact has also been incredible. Again, the fact that the San Antonio Spurs, with the best defender in the world in Victor Wembanyama off the floor, can put up a defensive rating of 98 against the New Orleans Pelicans, who were they were kind of flamethrowers last night. Jordan Poole, Jordan Hawkins, and Jeremiah Fears, who looks really fun. The fact you can do this is crazy, and you might see stretches last year where this happens, because, we still have great perimeter defenders, like Castle's good, Vassell is very solid, Keldon big body, but no Sochan on the team right now. And Luke Kornet being there instead of, for example, a Sandro or even a Gosse is so much of a difference maker that rim protection never goes away. So when a guy like Zion is off the floor, or you got a different kind of lineup where you're trying to slash at the net and you don't have that powerhouse, Luke Kornet is deterring so many shots that it's, again, kind of filling in for that Wemby impact. And that's why I say it's almost like a secret weapon, right? Because yes, 8 and 8 and 3.5 is nothing like too crazy. Again, if you just objectively look at the stat sheet, but the way he was, 1, having that defensive impact with Wemby not on the floor, 2, keeping the possessions alive, 3, having a great plus minus, just overall meshing well with the teammates. His movement is so good, right? We talked a little bit before the season on how his off-ball slashing for centers was in like the 90th percentile among centers, which is a very underrated statistic, but it played very well off of the rest of the Spurs. You could see him running some great pick and rolls with Dylan Harper, where Harper was making that read very easily to Luke Kornet. Kornet makes the game very easy for the rest of the San Antonio Spurs, and I find that very interesting, right? Like, he's a guy that we know his stats are never going to jump off the page. Like, oh my God, he's averaging 14 and 12 on the season. No, that's not Luke Kornet's game. The 8 and 8 that he's averaging at the moment is probably close to what he'll average throughout the whole season. Hoping that playmaking can stay high, because my gosh, this dude actually is a sneaky great passer. But those offensive rebounds, again, just being 7'2", 250 as like the smaller of your bigs, right? He's like 4 inches, 5 inches shorter than Wemby. I say 5 inches because I'm convinced Wemby is 7'7". But he's heavier, and he's bigger. He's more annoying to guard. You could see him getting wrapped up with Derek Queen under the net. Queen got called for 1 or 2 fouls because he had to try and get rid of Kornet. He's strong, he's tall, he keeps possessions alive, he's incredible on the defensive end, and he's made a huge impact for the Spurs so far. So leave me your thoughts on Luke Kornet's impact, because I gotta be honest, I am incredibly impressed with what I've seen from him especially, and the San Antonio Spurs through 2 games. Again, I've said it last night, I'll say it again. To be able to win that game versus the Pelicans, a game where you were incredibly sloppy, especially down the stretch. Castle did have the clutch shot, but do I still have the clutch shot? Castle had this, but he still had 9 turnovers on the night, including 3 or 4 clutch turnovers. You can still grind out that win. That's a playoff team win, because the teams that are not making the playoffs are not finishing off those games, just like the Pelicans didn't last night. Missed free throw from Zion, couldn't convert on the Spurs' many mistakes, and Luke Kornet's a big reason why the Spurs are looking so good. So leave me your thoughts on Kornet and this upcoming stretch down below, because that'll do it for this episode of Spurs Digest. And if you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, hey, subscribe to the channel. We're past 10,000. We got so many big things coming this year. Thank you for tuning in to the whole video if you made it this far. I've been your host, Josh Gosse, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.